When it comes to exercise, there's this perennial, I guess, like tug of war between, you know, the varying exercise factions, whether it's the endurance athletes or the cardio junkies or the, you know, the meatheads, as it were. Is there, in your view, in your read of the literature, does there seem to be one form of exercise that's better than others when it comes to long-term brain health?
No, and I think both are important because when you look across, and then there's an additional category that I'll call coordinative exercise, which I think does do something particularly, you know, magic for the brain compared to the others, and I'll come to that in a sec. But when you look at like the interventional literature, like randomized controlled trials of, you know, particularly older adults, having them do different types of exercise protocols, you see that different types of exercise have different benefits for the brain. So, you know, the classic paper with like walking for 40 minutes, 4 times a week, brisk walking, significantly improving hippocampal function, particularly as cardiovascular fitness improved. And you see this across multiple studies that the hippocampus and other areas of gray matter seem to be particularly benefited by aerobic type exercise with an intensity component. So the best study on this was published again a couple of years ago from an Australian group. You might have seen this study where they randomized people to 3 different groups. They had like a low intensity group, a moderate intensity group, which is basically a jogging group, and then a high intensity interval training group where they did the Norwegian 4x4 protocol. So 4 minutes at 85 to 95% maximum heart rate on a treadmill with a 3-minute break, and they did that 4 times around. And they each did that 3 times a week for 6 months. And they found that the high-intensity interval training group gained as much fitness actually as the jogging group, right? So it didn't improve fitness more as a measure, like measured by VO2 max, but they saw much greater improvements in and maintenance over time of hippocampal structure and hippocampal function. And those benefits were retained 5 years after the end of the trial. Like amazing that a 6-month exercise intervention and those benefits were retained for 5 years.
And it was just like in cumulatively just 16 minutes of exercise. I don't really know much about the 4x4. It came up recently on another episode of the show, but it's 4 minutes repeated 4 times at 85 to 90% heart rate.
So it's hard. Right. And so 4 minutes, 3-minute break, 4 times through. It ends up being a total of sort of like 40 to 45 minutes once you've like warmed up and with the rests and all that kind of stuff. And so like doing that 3 times a week, like people who have experience with that protocol, you tell them, hey, do this 3 times a week. They're like, I'm not sure I want to do that 3 times a week. But they did it. And then they also tracked their activity after the study. Everybody went back to their previous activity. So it's not like the people who did the sprints were like, I love this so much, I'm just going to keep doing sprints like 3 times a week. They didn't. But they still saw benefits 5 years later.
Whoa. That's insane. The Norwegian 4x4 method.
Norwegian 4x4 method.
I can't imagine sustaining 85%, 90% like heart rate output for 4 minutes.
Yeah. So the idea is that you should be able to, it's an intensity that you can keep the same speed for all 4 rounds, right? So you maybe like in the first few rounds, you're sort of like at that kind of 85%, and then towards the end, it gets harder as fatigue accumulates. You're sort of like nearer that 95%. I also don't think that you have to do it that way. I think that a lot of that benefit is driven by the production of lactate. And there's lots of ways to produce lactate. And lactate seems to be this like critical link between intense exercise, right? The interval training group didn't get any fitter than the jogging group, right? They both improved their fitness, but not one more than the other. So it's not driven by fitness. A main differentiator is going to be the things that get released during more intense exercise. And there are lots, so there could be some of these other things as well, right? They release more cortisol, other things. But lactate gets into the brain very easily. There are transporters that take up lactate. So the more lactate in your blood, the more lactate in your brain. And lactate switches on BDNF production. So lactate seems to be this like messenger from intense exercise like to the brain that then produces this trophic factor that supports neuroplasticity and neuronal function. So, but that seems to be particularly beneficial for the gray matter, right? The cortex, hippocampus. Then we're thinking about resistance training. You can actually, if you work hard doing, leg press or squats or something, you can get your lactate up to a similar level, right? You can work that hard. But there are other things that are released with resistance training, like IGF-1, that seem to be particularly beneficial for the white matter of the brain. So the white, and then when they measure this, it's executive function, your ability to make decisions, ability to suppress a response when you need to, right? These are sort of like sort of like prefrontal cortex, sort of quick decision-making type functions. And when you have older adults, again, do a really basic resistance training program 2 or 3 times a week, 6 to 8 exercises that kind of work the whole body, 3 sets of 8 to 12, just like the most basic resistance training program. You do that for several months, you see significant improvements in the structure of the white matter of the brain and improvements in executive function. So you can't really pick one or the other because they do different things. So I think a bit of both is important. And so then that final piece is this coordinative exercise piece. And again, a ton of like fascinating studies where they compare some kind of coordinative complex exercise. So like a team sport or a ball sport, right? Dancing. I know we talked about dancing last time I was here. And you compare that to some kind of physical activity that's the same level of physical intensity, but you see additional benefits for the brain with the sort of coordinative exercise, either better improvements in brain structure or better improvements in cognitive function. And that's probably because you're layering on cognitive processes that you wouldn't have otherwise, and that are often missing as we get older, right? Responding to a ball being hit at you in pickleball, you have to process that information really quickly and make a decision of where you're going to hit the ball back, right? There's strategy. You're always thinking about the score, right? So like in pickleball, like the scoring system is really complicated. So that's like an additional cognitive stimulus. With dancing, right? There's a music component, a social component. These things are more fun. So you consistently see, right, all exercise is great for the brain, but you see this slightly outsized benefit from these more like complex sports. And I think it's because especially as, on average, as people get older, they remove stimuli that require us to like constantly adapt to the environment, respond quickly, process information quickly. And so like these sports are a really kind of safe, nice way to maintain those functions.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that explains the line of research on like Tai Chi as an intervention.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Tai Chi is kind of lumped into those studies where coordination seems to have this additional benefit. So several studies show improvements in cognitive function with Tai Chi. So again, another really nice option. So you could broaden that out to all martial arts, right? You're controlling your body. You might be like responding to this other person who's trying to rip your head off. Ideally, it's not a sport where you get punched in the face a lot, right? Because that's probably going to be counterproductive. But those kinds of things where you're grappling, responding, reacting, and then like also strategically planning at the same time, right? As you would do on a tennis court, or you would do like on a mat, in jiu-jitsu or something like that. I think they're having these very similar benefits for the brain.
Everybody and their mother is doing jiu-jitsu these days, I feel like. Do you think is there a brain health benefit to doing jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I would put it in that sort of same category with those other things. And then layer on top, so actually I will credit this thought to Tim Ferriss, because he mentioned it when I was speaking to him about this. The like jiu-jitsu grappling is kind of like high intensity of interval training plus complex motor skills and strategic planning, right? So you go in, grapple, maybe it's a few minutes, right? Then you step back, take a break. You're producing a ton of lactate. You're working really hard, but you're also kind of working your brain as you like orientate yourself in 3D space, right? You're getting flipped around and that kind of stuff, right? These are additional stimuli that you're getting. So yeah, as long as you're not like getting kneed in the head, I think the jiu-jitsu is actually probably pretty cool in terms of brain health.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's so cool. My brother is a huge fan of. He's a fighter. He does it. I took up boxing during the pandemic, and I thought it was like insanely powerful for like the stimulation, the brain health aspect of things, until I got hit in the head. And then I was like, I'm out. I'm out.
The way that I do that I really like, and I think that this is a brand new sphere for cognitive stimulation that I'm really excited about, and sort of like doing some work is in virtual reality. So I use Supernatural on the MetaQuest headset, so it's like VR boxing. It's so much. Honestly, it's a ton of fun. So like it's music that you recognize. The targets kind of come at you in time with the music, but they're like often coming from like multiple directions. And it's a really good workout. So like, I mean, I have no affiliation with them, but I really enjoy that. So like, I would, if you enjoyed boxing but you don't want to get punched in the face, I would try it. I really enjoy it.
Is this the Oculus headset thing?
Yeah.
I have one of those.
Yeah.
And I was doing it back in the day, and then I just kind of, now it's gathering dust somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember that. Great workout too.
Yeah. A ton of fun. And sort of like, if we expand beyond that, I think that it offers us a really cool opportunity to create cognitive stimulus in ways that are much more similar to how the brain normally learns, right? So you can have like complex visual stimuli, auditory stimuli. You can require fine and complex motor movements as you like respond to whatever's being sent at you. So whether it be boxing or, all right, there are some platforms where you kind of have to make these very distinct hand movements to kind of hit balls in certain directions or respond to certain things, and you can sort of like layer on physical cognitive stimuli in a relatively sort of safe way, and then increase challenges in that way. And we know there's a good literature on video games for help being an option to support cognitive function. I think VR, if used in the right way, could like really expand that even further.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.